I kind of had to launch because like I was on unemployment. They don't kick you off unemployment in Australia. They just make it increasingly annoying to be on unemployment.
Yeah.
So, work for the dole programs, volunteering, more and more hoops. And it got to the point where there was just, reaching too many hoops. So I need to figure out if this was actually going to work out at all, or if I had to go get a menial job and live a life of quiet despair. Fortunately, it worked out.
This is the litRPG podcast, your one-stop shop for everything litRPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. So, hi and welcome everyone to the litRPG podcast, the only podcast that is again going back to Australia today with a small indie author known as Travis Deverell. You may know him as Shirtaloon. I just thought that I would continue my long streak of inviting small indie authors. So I'm very happy that you could make it. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Okay.
Definitely not lonely.
If you don't know what that was about, either look at Reddit or subscribe to the bonus material. Either works. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm good.
Okay, awesome. In general, for those viewers who don't know you yet, you have written a story called He Who Fights with Monsters. You are currently at a lot of chapters. I think you're writing book 11 right now, right?
I'm writing book 11. There are 9 books out. Book 10 comes out at the end of November.
Oh, great. Ooh.
I'm. What came out today? Or yesterday? No, today. I think it was chapter 826.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Which is a lot now that I think about it.
Yeah, don't think about it too much.
No, it's fine. Put in a lot of work to get there, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out by and large.
Yeah, just did you ever look at the Patreon rankings?
The Patreon rankings, there's like a site called Graphtreon.
Mm-hmm.
I think someone sent me a link to that. It was like Defire or Actus or someone sent me a link because I briefly got to the top of the writer charts.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
Yeah. Last I looked, I was number 2 behind some guy who wasn't actually a writer. Who was doing like video game logs or something.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. So definitely.
I suppose I could go look that up now. That's not desperate at all.
Anything to save us the loneliness. Oh my god.
Oh, let's see what we can find. I am, like number 5.
Oh man, how the mighty have fallen.
Except, hang on. A lot of that is I just took a month off, so my Patreon wasn't on. But that's fine. But I'm looking at the first 3, and they're all like video game log stuff, like Sims 4 custom content.
That is technically writing in some ways.
Yeah, so Imposter Syndrome is, I think, something that just about everyone runs into once they start having some success.
Yeah.
Especially in, creative fields, because we've all got that artistic temperament. And that sort of insecurity that drives us to create.
So a friend of mine, another editor coach, actually came to me and I was like, I don't know if I'm good at this job. People are telling me I'm good, but people are telling me I'm bad. What's up? And he came to me and he said like, yeah, Max, but how do you actually know you're any good at having imposter syndrome? And that clicked for me. That clicked.
Yeah.
What if they all find out you're just faking imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Because, when I started off, because I, started off unemployed when I started doing this. And like the actual success part was very sudden, but I'd actually been working on my story for about 18 months, maybe 2 years before I ever started releasing. So I'd put in a lot of work. But once I actually started releasing the success, I got quite lucky in that regard. The success came pretty quick. But that also left me with this sense of, am I standing on a trap door? Is this all some sort of horrifying prank show? And, I struggled with that for quite a long time. But, enough validation, enough checks clearing from the publisher, and, you do get over that kind of thing.
I think so.
Which is good, but yeah, it was something I struggled with for quite a while. Yeah, but now I'm at that point where I don't need that validation anymore. Like when I was starting out, like the idea of getting to the top of like the Audible chart or the Kindle chart was like, yeah. And it took me quite a few books to get there. Like I'd get to like number 2 behind friggin' Matthew McConaughey's, book of gibberish nonsense. And, I'd be like, God damn you, McConaughey. And like, you're doing all right if you're yelling at Matthew McConaughey for beating you out. It's like, oh, I got number 2 again. What? Will Smith slapped someone in the face and then released an autobiography. God damn you, Will Smith. Like, like if you're getting cranky because you didn't beat Will Smith, then you don't get to have imposter syndrome anymore. It's like, no, dude, you're doing fine.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's. I think I might have sealed your doom. I bought Will Smith's autobiography before I bought You Fights and Monsters. It was me. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it was just that one number.
Yeah.
Like that was the.
Just like an election, like 3 people like not voting for you, and that makes you lose it.
Yeah.
But actually, okay, this brings me to the first point. Why did you write this story? And how? Because you mentioned you were unemployed and you were just going like, I'm going to write a story.
Okay. So, I think like a lot of people, I've, been writing here and there for many years. Like I used to write these stories in back in high school that were shockingly bad. Very terrible. And, that's fine. Writing's a skill. And, you can't expect to be great at a skill when you first start.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. So, I write and I improved over time. But I'm a lazy procrastinator by nature. So, and I'm also sort of a pantser, meaning someone who doesn't sort of naturally plot out everything I do. So, there's a few sort of badly written half novels that, got deleted whenever, my computer at the time got chucked out. And no particularly great loss there. I mean, there's always stuff like that you can pull out and go back to. There are ideas and that stuff that I've, pulled out and recycled. But I do not have a lot of marketable skills. So, with lots of, unemployment, dead-end jobs, that kind of thing. So I found myself living quite near to the local university here. And so I said, you know what, bugger it. I'm going to go and I'm going to do an English degree. I'm going to do a bunch of creative writing units, learn to actually do this thing better than I can now. Like I don't think you need to go and do a creative writing degree or whatever to get good at writing. But I do think it can, help develop your sense of narrative. The best thing it did was put me in a bunch of creative writing units with a bunch of other writers. And because if you want to improve your writing, then having something you've written come back with like a stack of 20 critiques covered in red explaining everything you did wrong. Like, it toughens you up to criticism, which I think is essential, an essential skill. And it really helps you go through what you're doing wrong, what you're doing great. And that was absolutely fantastic. But I sort of reached a point where I got my degree, met a bunch of fantastic people. But then I started doing some postgraduate work and writing like very differently to my, sort of published style. But I had great fun just doing the actual story component. I was doing a creative writing master. The actual creative writing part was great, but then there was sort of the attached research component, the sort of, exploring the context. Mm-hmm. And I did not get into it to be, doing a cross-generational exploration of masculinity in post-colonial Australia. And I'm just, I hate this so much. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm doing it again. I'm actually using this postgraduate work to stall, just biting the bullet and writing something. And I knew that I needed to write something, and it had to be extremely silly. Which is how we got to a story about an interdimensional kung fu wizard. So I actually just stopped the postgraduate work immediately. Mm-hmm. By the way, in the English department, because I knew I was getting closer and closer to wanting to do some litRPG, because I found myself having to explain what it was to people in the English department again and again. Like, I did a unit called Popular Genres that was great. Looked at steampunk and romance and, obviously fantasy. Mm-hmm. It did not look at litRPG. But this was sort of just right before it kind of really exploded. I don't know if they look at it now a bit more, because now they have a graduate who's done quite respectably in that genre. But
who?
Yeah, his name's Jeff. You don't know.
Oh, okay.
But I have gone back and talked to tutorial groups and stuff as a guest, and that was quite fun. But yeah, I just sat down and then started writing for, a year and a half, 2 years. I did a great big draft. I chucked it out because it was heinously bad. And that was just never having finished a long form book before. Like, I'd done, short stories and whatnot, and like half a novel before it crapped out because I didn't plan a single goddamn thing. But this time, I had a plan. And I stuck to it. Like, I made, because the way I end up writing now is I have a sort of very bare bones plan that I'll follow to the end. Mm-hmm. The problem is I didn't actually flesh out the bones at all. I just left it as bones. So I got to the end and I've shortchanged the world building. I've shortchanged the character development. I've shortchanged the plot. Like, it's all just, like my first 3 books are 250 something chapters. Mm-hmm. The original version was 66. It was not good stuff. And that's fine. Like, cause I then, I did that, and then I sat down and just completely rewrote it from scratch, and it's worked out pretty well. And part of that process was looking at how I could actually turn this into something I can, make some money off. So I started doing research into how to, do a successful release on Royal Road. I started looking into getting attention and building a Patreon and when and how to do those things. And, a lot of that was just sort of scouring guides in Royal Road forums and that sort of thing. First to Fire has probably the best one of those going right now. It's somewhere in the Royal Road forums. And when people ask, what's the process for being successful, I tend to just point them right there. But it actually reached the point where I kind of had to launch because like I was on unemployment. They don't kick you off unemployment in Australia. They just make it increasingly annoying to be on unemployment.
Yeah.
So, work for the dole programs, volunteering, more and more hoops. And it got to the point where there was just, reaching too many hoops. So I need to figure out if this was actually going to work out at all, or if I had to go get a menial job and live a life of quiet despair. Fortunately, it worked out. So, yeah, I ended up starting releasing, and then I started learning all the other lessons, like the fact that, a lot of the process, a lot of being a writer isn't just writing, which is why, all of a sudden I'm doing like 18-hour days as I have to learn everything involved and, do all the fiddly little bits that take way more time. Suddenly I'm learning the term community engagement and then doing that. And, there were a lot of mistakes early on. Like, there are certain people who are going to have opinions about your story that you don't agree with. And starting at a place where you're sort of respectfully trying to explain your perspective of an author, and then sort of escalating drastically from there is not a good way to go. For example, my protagonist was a retail worker who gets, isekai'd. And, he kills a person, he has a breakdown. And
as you do.
Yeah. And I had people saying, I don't know why this guy's such a pussy. He should be like snapping necks. And I'm like, dude, he sold like office supplies. He wasn't in the SAS. And which is probably good. We've had some problems with our SAS here in Australia. They've been a bit war crimey.
Oh, yeah.
A couple of years, because the SAS is our, Delta Force Navy SEAL, our super elite special forces guys, and they strongly considered just eliminating them entirely because they were just too war crimey. So probably best that wasn't the model on which I based my main character.
I won't talk about the problems we had with the GSG9. So go ahead.
I think everyone who has like some very behind the scenes sort of special forces people, it just like a lot of the combination of a lot of power and not a lot of oversight is always problematic, and that's in fact a key theme of my story. So
and their job is to effectively probably kill people. So
well, it certainly involves killing people.
And there's a certain mindset that is required and that it breeds. So cool. Okay, so back to the story.
Okay, so I'm at the point where I just sort of have to release because it's getting increasingly annoying. But so I start releasing on Royal Road, and things go very quickly because like one of the keys to Royal Road, it's quite a bit different now, but the key is still getting on the front page, whether that's Rising Stars or I think it was called Trending back then. But once you get on the front page, then your readership goes up and the 0.5 ratings start to hit you.
Yep.
But I was lucky I didn't get too many. But actually, I actually started I've only started I think one thread on the Royal Road forum, and I did this like maybe a week after I started releasing chapters.
I saw that.
And it was called something like I just got my first 0.5 rating and now I'm sad.
Yeah.
And that apparently resonated with people.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the next maybe 2.5 years, it kept getting necroed. Every now and again, I'd get notifications like someone replied on this thing you did like 2.5 years ago. And the context is so extremely different. Because back then I was an unknown Royal Road author, like so many thousands of people, and just sharing experience. So it's almost like a sort of odd time capsule thing. Given the context. And then, because I'm on a Discord for Aethon, my ebook publisher, with a bunch of other authors like Zogarth and stuff. And one of them found this thread. And, oh my God, they would not let me at the end of it. It's like, oh no, poor Shirt. Poor Shirt got a 0.5 rating. Wow.
Did I take that thread, screenshot it, and collage it with an image of your Patreon? Maybe, but... I hope you can appreciate I chose the most annoying jingle I could, but do you like numbers going up? Well, so do I. Which is why I would like you to like, subscribe, and maybe even check out my Patreon. Recording, editing, and hosting these podcasts takes a lot of money. So yeah, I need funds, you need more content. It's a deal made in heaven. Did I mention the episodes on Patreon are ad-free?
But, I got lucky because I got onto the front page sort of by a cheat. Because one of the category, because there's various top categories, top rated, top whatever. And one of them is for reviews. And there was a review for my story that was the top rated review on Royal Road for something like 7 weeks. So someone's review got on there, but because it was a review for my story, I'm just sitting there on the front page. Nice. So by the time I've been releasing for a month, my readership has grown quite nicely. I wasn't sure how quite nicely, but that sort of became evident once I started the Patreon, because it had been a month and I was starting to get people asking when the Patreon comes. Because when I did my release, I did like 15 chapters in my first week and then 10 chapters in my second week, and then sort of hit my regular schedule of 5 chapters, which I still can't believe I thought was a good idea. Well, I mean, so it ostensibly was a good idea, but because of that sort of de-escalation from that initial burst, because I think it's always good to have enough for people to dig into. People were like, "You're doing a Patreon, right?" Because everyone knows Patreon means advanced chapters.
Did you have any of these?
Yeah. So, but I had the chapters.
Oh, okay.
Like I had them good to go. Like I said, I'd researched and I'd planned, so I was ready for that. And one of the things I'd done, and I don't think you can even do it anymore. I think they removed it, which was to set goals in Patreon.
Yeah, they took it out.
Yeah. So, and like I said, I was unemployed at the time. So I set myself a couple of goals, like basically enough money to get me sort of halfway off unemployment, and then all the way off unemployment. I'm like, okay, I seem to be building a nice audience here. If I can actually hit those goals in a couple of months, that'll be awesome. And I put like bonus chapter releases, like basically double chapter releases for a week for each goal. And I had the chapters there, like they needed editing and polishing, but they were fine. That was going to take ages. It took a day and a half to clear both goals once I actually launched the damn Patreon.
Half what?
A day and a half.
A day and a half. Oh my!
To hit, because like it wasn't like some huge amount of money. It was just basically enough to replace unemployment benefits. So it wasn't a huge amount, and that got hit pretty quick.
Cue in DJ Khaled.
But that was sort of the start of me not getting any sleep for the rest of the year, because it's like all of a sudden I've got to edit and review and polish these chapters up to a releasable state, and I did, and it was great. I spent the next year explaining, no, I'm never ever doing double chapters weeks ever again. But that was sort of, yeah. So once the actual Patreon hit, that's because that lucky break of getting onto the front page of Royal Road really gave me that tailwind that helped push me forward. So that was fantastic. It made the Patreon launch great. But a week before, so the week before the Patreon is going live, so it's all set. I've got everything all set up. It's good to go. And I'm launching on like the Monday of next week. And then I accidentally get a job interview. Which is fine because you've got, one of the things you got to do on unemployment is looking for jobs, and that's perfectly fine. Getting a job would have been nice, but the timing was not nice. The job itself was like a temp gig doing like call center work, because they passed a law at around that time that basically said that the utility companies, when they were instituting things that would completely screw over the people who paid them for utilities, they were now legally required to send people a letter saying, yes, we're going to screw you over now. And it was like retroactive for however long. So they were about to send out a bunch of letters to everyone saying, yeah, we're about to bend you over the table. So they were expecting an influx of calls. So they were hiring some call center people. And I'd done that kind of work before. So I applied and got an interview. That's fine. It was at this industrial park, like way outside of town, like just beyond like public transport.
Oh, God.
Range. So I took a very expensive taxi out there for this job interview. And yeah, well, I wasn't opposed to getting a job because, money is better than being unemployed. The timing was bad. So I was trying to tank this interview. So I'm just like super casual. Just problem is not giving a crap looks a lot like confidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just super relaxed, super chill. They offered me a job immediately. I'm like, oh my God, because like if the Patreon thing works, because basically if I got a job, like because I'd set myself a schedule for writing and I knew how much writing I could do. I'd be like during my sort of research process, I'd figured out how much writing can I do without killing myself, and I figured that out. I was wrong because I didn't know how much non-writing would be involved. But that's a whole other thing. But so I had sort of the plan for the whole writing thing. So if Patreon worked out, great. I can sort of dive into this writing thing. I didn't have a job. I could just go full-time immediately, even if it wasn't paying straight away. Except then I got this job offer, which meant I'm stuck either like, and the thing is, I wouldn't know if the Patreon was going to work until after I'd accepted the job or not. But if I refuse the job, my unemployment benefits get cut off. Oh, no. If I accept the job, I'd then, and the thing worked out, I have to quit on my like second day. But as it turns out, my job references, who were all like interstate for supervisors from some work I'd done previously, had all like sort of bailed. So I effectively had no references when they tried to check them. Like, we couldn't get in contact with anyone. So, we're actually going to have to withdraw the job offer.
Oh, no.
So I'm like, oh no. Well, those are the breaks. Like, I think that may have been like the most positive response they've ever heard to say to a job rejection, but then the Patreon worked out, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I got to go into my sort of job network agency and say, because when I was doing the thing, they knew I was writing a book, and that was taking up a large portion of my time. And, there was a lot of, yes, we know you're writing your little book. That's lovely. What we really need you to do is get a menial job that takes up all your time and energy, which I didn't love.
Yeah.
So there was that sort of moment of triumph of sort of marching in there. It's like, no, it's working out quite nicely. Thank you very much.
Vindication.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Like just watch, and yeah, that was very nice. And it did work out very quickly for me. I know, a lot of people sort of struggle. They release books and books and books. I got very lucky. I think luck is a matter of preparation, so you're ready to seize an opportunity when it comes along.
Yeah.
And I definitely did that. But, you need that lucky break to be there for you to seize it when it happens. And for me, it was, sort of arsing my way into being on the front page of Royal Road when I 100% didn't earn it. And things went very well from there. And the timing could not have been better. Because I started releasing at a time where indie publishers like, Eighth on Podium sort of became aware of Royal Road and the sort of views that were getting done by the people on the popular list. So there was something of a gold rush to snatch up all the big Royal Road authors. Because I was way too, overworked and stressed to even look at sort of self-publishing or anything like that. Like, yeah, you can theoretically make a lot more money self-publishing than getting published. But when the real treasure is time, they can take those times, constraints of doing that off of you. And I think that is absolutely worth the trade-off for me. Self-publishing works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's great. But they came along, the books came out. I think it was somewhere in book 3 that they really started taking off. Because there's a lot of debate on Royal Road about whether or not you should go Kindle Unlimited. Because there is that exclusivity that they require.
Yeah, but...
And and that means taking down anything that gets published. Any chapters that go into a book that gets published have to come down for Royal Road. And there's a lot of people that really do not like that. But the problem is Kindle Unlimited represents most of the paying litRPG audience.
Yes.
Like litRPG readers are voracious, much like romance readers. And
you take that
Kindle
back.
I think I think there are massive crossovers in sort of the audience model and the production model between romance and litRPG, but and that's why they both thrive on Kindle Unlimited, because that is a great deal for very, very hungry readers. So I think something like 80% of my ebook sales are Kindle Unlimited. Last time I checked, it's been a while, but yeah, it was something like 80% of my ebook income comes from KU. And can you
even sell anything outside of KU?
Yes, you can on Amazon.
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so people just buying ebooks individually, it's about 20%. 19. There is like a 0.5% who buy the actual print-on-demand paperbacks. But it's pretty much litRPG is a digital audience, and they're a hungry audience, and that means KU. Although I have also done very well on audio. So I've got a great narrator in Heath Miller. And that's also worked out very well for me. But but I was very worried because I'd built my audience on Royal Road. So there was that fear of going KU, taking it down. I knew there was sort of negative reaction. So I was worried that it wouldn't, that I'd stop having that there for people to read book one and sort of feed. And, was I grabbing money right now, but gimping myself from generating new readers down the road?
Yeah.
That turned out to be the exact opposite of the case, because like Royal Road is big, and bigger now than then, but they're not bigger than Amazon. Like the number of people that Amazon reaches is basically most of the English speaking planet. And so, when I went on KU, when I went on Audible, when I, came off Royal Road for the published stuff, I found my Patreon going up like vastly. And part of that was everyone was going up vastly. Like sort of the big guys were making what, $3,000 a year. So $3,000 a month, maybe on Patreon, and years later, it's 10 times that. But a part of that is everyone's been moving into Amazon, over this litRPG boom, and that's getting people. It's driving people to Patreon, and I think it is driving people to Royal Road as well.
Yeah,
because I still release everything for free on Royal Road before it gets published. And, I 100% intend to continue to do that for the entire series. There will be people who've only ever read it for free on Royal Road, and I have zero problem with that. Like, I spent a lot of time, like a lot of my adult life, with very, very little money. So free options are absolutely fantastic. But I try to, now that I'm not in that situation anymore, I try to be less, avoid piracy and that sort of thing in my media consumption. Like, but that's not always viable either, because Game of Thrones here in Australia, basically Fox, like Rupert Murdoch, basically bought the rights to broadcast Game of Thrones here in Australia. But as opposed to putting it on TV, he put it on his cable network that nobody has, and you had to buy it as part of some great big package of stuff. So you had to go get cable, and then you had to go get this great big package if you wanted to watch Game of Thrones. Obviously, everyone pirated it. Like everyone. Basically, the whole country was pirating Game of Thrones, to the point where they actually took the ISPs to court.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Over it. And the High Court of Australia, our Supreme Court, basically told them to stick it up their ass. Everyone was pirating it because they made it so goddamn hard to actually get a hold of if they, didn't want to spend like, $200 a month on sports packages and movies that everybody's already got on streaming. So, and so they didn't actually legalize downloading Game of Thrones, but they did the next best thing.
Yeah, the whole convenience thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I totally get I totally get that. That being also said, like, all the pirate sites that have, stories like mine and Zogarth's and whoever on there can be a problem, because Amazon uses bots to make sure that KU exclusivity is being held up to.
Yeah.
And if they get like a false positive from one of those pirate sites saying, he hasn't taken everything down, that can mess with your book launch.
Oh no.
Yeah. I haven't copped that. The closest I've got is, apparently they use different bots for like audio, ebook, and like the published stuff. So the paperback thing got a false positive from some pirate site, thought I was still had it up, so they shut down the paperback aspect on launch day, which was actually fine because I sell almost zero physical books.
Okay.
So that was fun. But I found so basically that was it. The combination of the litRPG boom, sort of starting to releasing on Amazon, it was all fantastic timing for a lot of litRPG authors coming from Royal Road. And that's sort of left us where we are today.
Which is at top 5 of the Patreon writing thing, right under the Sims mods. So absolutely cool.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good.
But like I said, I started talking about Imposter Syndrome because like that validation was really important. When I was dealing with that. But now I don't sort of need that so much. I'm doing well. I don't really need sort of, the great reviews of Thingo. As long as, I'm doing well, I've got money rolling in, that's all great. Because I know there's a lot of bitterness, like in some of the Royal Road forums, authors who maybe aren't doing so well. Like I know Zogarth has been fairly active in the Royal Road forums. And so as probably the most successful sort of active forum user there, he's copped a lot of accusations of like gatekeeping and all this stuff, saying basically, you've got all the readers, they're not reading the good stuff because they're all reading your mass produced. And it is hot nonsense, absolute hot nonsense. Like everyone who's successful in litRPG is lifting up the genre. It really is the tide raises all ships situation. Like, because all the people who are doing well, every person they bring into the genre is someone new who's going to go looking for the next thing. And, some of those authors who aren't doing so, they might be the next thing. Some of them will be because, someone's going to be.
And also the idea of you are keeping all the readers. It's not like Zogarth is running around with a whip and like telling you to read a story.
No, you're not allowed to read anything but Primal Hunter.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand if you're like super sad that your story isn't doing well, but that's mostly a you problem. If your story isn't doing well, like either you're not writing to market. I mean, like, fuck it. My story has 1,000 followers. Like, am I crying? No. I think it's a great fucking success. I hit top 10 writing stars. I'm fucking doped. Like, this is great.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, like, it's a thing of measurements. Sorry, like this really riles me up.
Oh yeah, like probably the most insane thing I ever saw in this regard was someone talking about how his Patreon wasn't enough to cover his Spotify Premium, and he was complaining because how can he be a writer without Spotify Premium?
If you think about that, that doesn't make any sense.
No. That's nonsense. Like, like it just makes me, think of like, how the hell did Hemingway write The Old Man and the Sea when he couldn't listen to Maroon 5? Like,
okay. So fair enough. Without being too cranky about this, like maybe for them it's their arbitrary measurement of like, hey, I want to be able to buy my Spotify with my Patreon, and that's a perfectly legit goal, right?
Well, and I've no problem with that. Goal setting is fantastic, but complaining that you can't be a writer unless you've got Spotify Premium, it's like, no, there's ads. I'll never create my masterpiece.
Yeah, I think maybe they didn't come out right for that person. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because there is a lot of bitterness, and I get it. Like, because a lot of like Royal Road is a massive platform for authors to start off with.
Yeah,
it's like absolutely fantastic. But if you're not writing like fantasy lit RPG, the further you get from fantasy lit RPG, the harder your road is to move forward. And a lot of it is, and especially like back in the day, lit RPG where the main character's a dude, and the women don't get too uppity.
What's this? Another ad? Yeah, because I'm not Zogarth and I really need money. Joke aside, if you're enjoying this podcast, check out Patreon, like, subscribe, you know the drill. Speaking of Patreon, by the way, there is at least half an hour of content for every hour of podcast you're listening to. For Raven's Dagger, for example, we have 2 hours of bonus content that you can enjoy. All right, I'll see you there and enjoy the show. Yeah.
Like lots of especially like 3-4 years ago when some of the big ones now were just starting out, there'd be like LGBT characters and there'd be some hard pushback for that. And yours is like delving right into that, right?
Oh, yeah. At the very beginning. Yep.
Yeah, because I got a lot of sort of private messages from people just saying things like, thank you for including, like, because I don't have a lot of that stuff. I don't push it hard, but there are characters in there. And, I've got messages saying, thank you for including this, without making a big deal about it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you in a personal message, because if I put this out in like the public forums, I'm going to get swamped by loans.
Oh, absolutely. So for the ironic part is that for me, the whole like non-binary character at the beginning, that has nothing to do with the story mostly. I'm actually I'm keeping the character as it is. Don't get me wrong. I'm very proud of this character, but
oh no, you should absolutely not compromise on that.
It's just like the fact that they're non-binary is absolutely like it comes up later on, but I need to redo the beginning anyway. So
it's a character trait like brown hair or
I spoke with an author friend of mine about this, and he said that I should really do more with this character or leave it out. And I do think that's a fair criticism, because the author I'm talking to is a successful guy, and he says like, well, basically what you did is you created the analogy of creating a black character and calling him Jamal. Like, kind of get where he's coming from.
Yeah. I completely agree. And that's why I don't delve like super hard into this, because like I don't want to tokenize.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to speak poorly for communities that like I'm not a part of, like that. And I'm not qualified to be a representative because I don't sort of understand those experiences. So I have the characters there, but they're just there, doing whatever. And then and it's not like, just one character, but it's also not like sort of going out and trumpeting. Like all my SJW accusations tend to come from things like like economic, viewpoints and, anti-capitalism.
Yeah, and autocracy.
Anti-authoritarianism, I guess the one thing I do push, and this is like sort of the most milquetoast these days of thingos, is, well, not really feminism so much as just having female characters who do things that aren't chase after dudes. Like I have a lot of female characters, and that shouldn't be a big deal. Yeah. Like it's not like I'm harping on women empowerment or anything. I've just built a world where, at least where everyone has magic, it's a balanced playing field, because a lot of the factors that go into sexual discrimination are eliminated.
Exactly. Mostly what I really liked about your approach to this is that the entire idea of pregnancy and that kind of stuff can all be like magically solved, and that women no longer, like even in societies where there's like lots of danger coming outside from monster surges and all that kind of stuff, women don't need to stay in the house and keep the children safe because there's only one woman, but there can be 10 men. Men are more expendable. That doesn't is just blah, blah, blah. Sorry, slow down, Max. Let's do it again. That's just not true anymore, right? So because women can fight and they are just as capable as men, and with magic being in the mix, that's doubly true.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's really the only approach I take. I don't try to harp on this thing. But when I first started off, every time I'd introduce a new female character, because I have a lot of them, and I'd be like, okay, so here comes Farah. She's the first one. Okay, So she's the love interest. And then comes Anissa. Okay, so she's the love interest. And
that turned out, yeah.
She's the love interest. Except then I had 2 female characters show up, not related to the main character at all. They get their own perspective chapter. And the response wasn't, so there was, a sort of mixed response. There was half, okay, so she'll eventually be the love interest. And that permeated for quite a long time. That was Sophie, when Sophie and Belinda came along.
Oh, yeah,
and the other half of the response was, this bitch has got to die. I actually, on my Patreon long ago, this was somewhere around maybe book 8.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Is that where the whole nubile slave thing came from?
No.
It was just like just as a response, as a kind of like little bit of an FU. Okay.
Yeah. No. No. I did a Patreon post because this was when I'd reintroduced. This was book 7 or 8. I'd reintroduced Vespa Romaros. She was like Zara's aunt, who Jason had like maybe one scene with in book 2 or 3. But she came back because Jason goes to the place where she lives, and she ends up having to interact with Jason a lot. And, people are like, this bitch has got to die because, she was acting in a way that was antagonistic to the main character, even if it was just because they had a personality clash. And it's like, this bitch has got to die. And I did this great big long post about how people calling for the death of my latest female character was like my Groundhog Day. Because it just feels like every day I get up and people are calling for the death of my latest female character.
Oh, man.
But audiences like self-select. Like I've been very lucky in terms of like a continually growing audience. So I do get more and more people in. So I do get a lot of different perspectives. But by and large, sort of all that early stuff, like, Sophie coming along and not getting immediately killed, and all these female characters who weren't falling in love with the protagonist, and, and LGBT characters like Rufus gets revealed as a bisexual just when one of the other characters comes out of his room and does a walk of shame.
Is he available? the way you describe him in the books is very attractive.
Yeah, you'd hope, right?
Yeah.
But that, and like a lot of people were completely missed that fact.
Yeah.
Like I've got like 5 books. Like, what do you mean Rufus is bisexual? But
well, if their gaydar is that bad, maybe that's why.
But all of this stuff and like the atheism, like my protagonist starts atheist, meets a god. Okay, not an atheist anymore. I definitely believe in gods. There's one. But just the concept of atheism sent people into a frenzy. Like an absolute frenzy. I got people saying, in the comment sections, like all atheists are secretly Chinese assassins.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I've got a lot of like landmarks, like in those early things as aspects of the world or aspects of the characters come out. Like, I didn't get pushback on Rufus being a bisexual. I was expecting to. I got way more pushback on just strong female characters, like just female characters doing stuff. Like some of them get a pass, like Danielle Gellas. People tend to love, but a lot of them, especially if they clash with the protagonist, they get a lot of hate.
I think. Okay, so this is very interesting to me.
Yeah,
I think Danielle, especially, and this ties into my bigger question later. Danielle especially is so well beloved because she kind of takes a motherly role, right?
Yeah.
So, and my question is, why do you think that is?
I think, well, there's definitely a pattern of anyone who's sort of antagonistic towards Jason getting a lot more hate than others. Not dudes so much, but female characters. And Danielle was never like that. Danielle Geller was like the person who just looked at Jason when he was still completely rubbish, saw piles of potential, and started immediately putting it to use.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it.
The question I had beyond that was, why do you think that it is especially antagonistic female characters that get so much hate?
I just think that it's becoming a lot more diverse now, but like, especially a few years ago, like there was a very large core of lonely internet dudes reading litRPG, and they have been famously not super open to women doing things.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
With that sentence. Yeah. I mean, because we go back a few years, we're talking the era of like female Ghostbusters, and you know, while the movie isn't great, it doesn't deserve the kind of hate that it got.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found pushback against women versus any of the other stuff. Well, like I've got like a minor character who's like a magical trans person. Like just every few years, they'll just sort of magically transition. Got no pushback on that at all because it comes quite late in the series. I think at that point, my audience is mostly sort of like self-selected in.
Yeah.
Like all the sort of, because there are absolutely stories out there for angry internet people to jump on. Like I was talking with Heath Miller, who narrates my books, and mine was the first litRPG that he's done, but he said he's actually turned them down before because he read them and just didn't want to be reading that content. He didn't want to take all that time going through all that stuff and voicing opinions that he really, really didn't agree with.
There's the few. I mean, if you want to know my particular preferences towards some of these, you can find posts of myself somewhere. But there's some that are completely atrocious. You know, with like mind control is always hard to write, but then it's mind control, and it's completely glossed over that this is essentially sexual assault, and then the main characters are completely fine with it. He doesn't question it ever. Like I couldn't read that.
There's stuff like that, like because I saw some of the stuff, the translated stuff coming out of China. Because when I was just first getting into it, that's the stuff that was everywhere.
Yeah.
So I didn't finish a lot of those, but I started a lot of them, and some of those, the fact, like the fact that they were released as opposed to used as evidence was shocking to me.
I read some from Russia where I was like, I can see the cultural inference here, but I do think there's. Yeah. It's not that these people are like evil. I just really think they just didn't think this thing through at all because it just doesn't matter to them.
Oh yeah, because a lot of the Chinese ones just sort of screamed the one-child policy has really screwed over the men in that country. Like, you know, there was a lot of like, I don't know that they've ever actually met a woman. And that is just a massive cultural thing that they're still struggling to deal with.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, I remember that. That was not a good idea. But before we're going down that road, I want to ask you, beyond don't write that, what's the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
I don't know. I mean, because I think it varies person to person. Like the best advice is the advice that you really, really need. Yeah. So some people, sort of naturally fall into certain patterns, and they've got a whole bunch of good habits. And I think everyone will naturally fall into certain good habits, certain bad ones. So it really comes down to the writing advice that you need. Like, so for me, it was probably just keep writing, stop going back and trying to fix everything. Just keep writing, get to the end, because that's kind of what I needed to get to the end. But then you've got because there's lots of bad writing advice out there. Like there's sort of famously bad writing advice, like if you're not driven to write, like if you're not just have a constant need to write, then don't write because it's not going to work out. Shockingly bad advice. There are actually very, very few people who are so driven they just keep cranking it out. Like I think Actus is one of those rare people who just keeps cranking it out. They've got that sort of natural drive. I don't have that. Like I'll get it, and I use a metaphor, the creative tank. Yeah. So when I've taken some time off, the creative tank's full, and I'm keen to go. But eventually, the creative tank will run out if you write at the kind of rate you need to be churning out, especially serial fiction. And then I need a break. But that sort of keep going, keep plugging along. And the thing that actually ended up working for me that got me to finish was setting a schedule. So this is sort of how I enacted that particular piece of advice, which is just keep going, which was just going, okay, so, right now I don't have a job. So I'm going to write each day from this time, each day. And I did, because if you wait until inspiration strikes, you are never going to write a book.
Put ass in chair.
So I sat down and I wrote, and it wasn't always great, but that's what revising and editing is for, or chucking it out and rewriting it entirely. I don't do that too often, but I have done it, and it tends to work out amazingly.
Can you talk about a little bit about like just 2 or 3 sentences? How many hours do you actually write? How many do you revise? Like, what's your cycle there?
Okay, so perfect world, I'll have some buffer chapters. So I'll write a draft, and when I've got buffer chapters, my writing is just better because I'm less stressed. So I will tend to write a draft, then put that aside, and then pull out whatever I wrote last week or whenever. That is going to be the next thing that gets released. It gets because after I write a thing, I'll send it off to some of my friends, and they'll look at it, send it back. They'll have notes that I may or may not say rude things at my screen about. not to them. I'll just like, oh, you mother. I'm still not perfect at taking criticism, but I'll get that back and I'll go through it, revise it, and then I'll pass it in mostly for proofreading, do a final polish. Out it goes, and that's my thing for every chapter. But if I'm under the gun and I don't have any buffer chapters, that all gets done in a day. Which I don't like doing it that way. I like to have those buffer chapters to go, but sometimes life just screws you.
Yep.
And sometimes the need for sleep or just straight up procrastination screws you. Like I am far from a flawless man.
Who is? Besides me, I mean.
But that's my process. How long it will take varies. Like I totally redid how I sort of schedule. Like I dropped back the number of chapters from 5 to 3 this year, because by the end of last year, I was wrecked. I was doing 18, 16, 20 hour days because I was just so exhausted that everything took 3 times as long to do. and that meant I never got ahead with buffer chapters. So it was just this sort of cycle of being so tired. I never had time to get rest, and because I was never rested, everything took longer. So yeah, I just took a huge break, reduced my thing, and I think my not just mental health, but also the actual quality of the work, I think, has improved from doing so. But so that would be my other best bit of advice: get enough rest.
Take breaks.
Just really, because it solves so many problems. Everything will take less time and be better when you're done if you've had enough rest. Which I have not had today, but that's because real life has encroached upon me once again. But yeah, so I can take anywhere up to I've had 20-hour days. Usually when I'm breathtakingly tired, although sometimes it's because I'm doing some like great big long sequence, like a battle sequence. Like the first time I had a real problem with this was I did a really big battle sequence. It's the one from the end of book 1. Great big battle, tons and tons of people. It's the first time I did a fight that wasn't one chapter, because I don't like to overextend fights, regardless of what the end of book 9 might make you think. So I try to make fights, like if I'm actually showing them, make them important, make them sort of character driven, or just sometimes you have to do the big fight because that's what the story demands. Story demands the great big fight. It's the thing I'm worst at by far, so it takes me the longest. And the first time I did that big fight, I did the first draft of it, and that was just like a 20-hour day. The first time I'd worked that long when I was actually writing efficiently. And then it needed lots of work because it's the hardest thing for me. So it needed multiple sort of revision passes. Took me multiple days. And that was good because the whole thing ended up being multiple chapters. But that's something that makes me take a long time when I end up writing something that ends up really long and ends up getting revised into, I've done chapters that have turned into 2 weeks worth of chapters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
By the time the revision process gets through it all, but then I'll just have a day where it just goes whoop, just comes out buttery smooth. Like it still needs the full revision process for polish and whatnot, but it'll just come out so easy. And those are the best days. I really, really needed to have one of those days yesterday, and I did.
Yes.
And when that happens, it's just like, oh my God, because otherwise I would have been working on this for so long and gotten so cranky.
Yeah, I can see what
yeah, but yeah, sometimes it just dialogue is the easiest thing for me. My series is very dialogue heavy for a reason. It's because it's the thing I enjoy the most. I think it's what I do best. Whereas battles and fights are the things I do the least well, which is why they tend to get the most work, because dialogue comes out usually pretty close to where I want it to end up, whereas fights rarely do. So they tend to get the most work and absorb the most time. But like I said earlier, it's about skill, and I think I've improved vastly on how my fights work.
That's pretty good.
The course of the series.
So first bit of advice is to take breaks, and the other one is get no wait, what was the other one?
Keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward, keep the run rolling.
Yeah, once you've actually finished, you can go back. And it depends. Serial fiction versus writing a book, 2 different things.
Yeah. So hold your horse for that one, because I need to know how you would do the whole revision process in serial fiction, because that's something I struggle with and it's very interesting to me. However,
Yeah.
I also have bodily needs, like, for example, eating, and I would like to do that right now. So how about we take 5? I got some snacks.
Yeah.
And then we meet back here.
Sounds good.
Cool. I'll see you in 5.
Cool.
Haha, cliffhanger. Why? Well, because, yeah, I don't know if you guys know this, but editing these podcasts takes a lot of time. And the good news is that Travis and I recorded about 4.5 hours of this thing, which I think is amazing. It took a lot of time and we had great fun doing this. However, this also means that I have to edit at least 12, 14 hours, like just working time editing the content, and I can't handle that right now. This is too much, and I can handle it in 1 week for sure. So what I did is I split the content in half. So you're getting 1 full-size episode this week, and then another full-size episode next week, with the Patreon part being cut out as usual. Okay, with all that being said, thank you so much for watching and or listening, and I'll see or hear you next time.